Yo, what's up? Dr. Swole here, MD, pro physique athlete. Today I'm going to be sharing a full science-based hypertrophy program based on the push-pull split. This is a 4-day moderate volume program well designed for late beginners and beyond. The push-pull split divides your body up into 2 main days, push and pull. On push days, you train muscles involved in pushing movements, including your chest, triceps, and shoulders, as well as those involved in squat type movements, your quads, as well as calves. On pull days, you train muscles involved in pulling movements, your back and biceps, as well as those involved in pulling posterior dominant movements like in deadlifts, so your glutes and hamstrings. I'll be sharing this full 4-day muscle building program with you. We'll start off with a program walkthrough where I share everything you need to know to run the program yourself, including exercises, sets, and reps. Next, we'll talk about the weekly setup, which is how I've designed the program to have your days split up throughout the week. And finally, we'll talk about pros and cons of this push-pull split program. Okay, let's do our program walkthrough. This is Dr. Swole's push-pull program. It's set with moderate volumes, 4 days per week, well designed for a late beginner and onwards. We got push day number 1, pull day number 1, push 2, and pull 2. Here are the exercises and there are the sets and reps. Down here we have the total number of exercises for each workout to give you an idea of workout length. And here we have the total number of sets per muscle group. We have quads, glutes and hamstrings, chest, back, side delts, biceps, triceps, and calves. And you'll see that this is a moderate volume program. Starting off with push day number 1, we kick it off with squat for the quads. 3 sets, and we're doing top set back offs here. This is my notation. So we work up to one top set of 5 to 8 reps, and then we back off about 10% on the bar and then do 2 more sets of 5 to 8 reps. The top set back off method is a great way for building strength and size at the same time. You get to handle some heavy weights on your top set and still get in that volume with a little lighter weight in your back off sets. Then we have leg press also for the quads, 3 sets of 6 to 10. You can superset your leg presses with leg press calf raises, 4 sets of 8 to 12. I listed them out of order here, but when you have supersets where one exercise actually has more sets than the other, like here, start off with your calf raises. That way you won't be wasting any time with this superset. Then we have dumbbell bench press for the chest, and here we have 5 sets, and again we're using a top set back off method. So one top set of 5 to 8 reps followed by 4 back off sets of 5 to 8 reps. Then we have incline dumbbell flies for the chest, 3 sets of 10 to 15. Try setting your incline at 30 or 45 degrees as long as you're able to get a good stretch in your upper pecs. Then we have dumbbell skull crushers. These are for the triceps, 3 sets of 8 to 12. And you can superset these dumbbell skull crushers with dumbbell lateral raises for the side delts, 4 sets of 8 to 12. I like sitting on a bench for dumbbell lateral raises just because it reduces the amount of body English you're able to use with your lower body. Really focus on lifting the weight through your elbow so that you really place stress on those delts. Next, we have pull day number 1, and we start off with deadlifts for the glutes and hamstrings, 3 sets. And again, we're using a top set back off. So one top set of 5 to 8 reps followed by 2 back off sets of 5 to 8 reps. We follow deadlifts with walking lunges, which I actually count for quads and glutes and hamstrings, 3 sets of 6 to 10. Some people will count lunge type movements as more quad heavy. I actually place them here somewhat on purpose so that you can get a bit of an extra quad stimulus throughout the week. Next, we have weighted chin-ups for the back, and we have 4 sets with a top set back off method. One top set of 6 to 10 reps followed by 3 back off sets of 6 to 10 reps. I really want you to think about getting strong on your weighted chin-ups. I think these are an amazing exercise for overloading the lats, and they also involve the biceps to a high degree. So I actually have them programmed here in a strength-oriented fashion. Now, you'll notice that here my leg work tends to come before my upper body work, and this is because I like to start with my toughest work first. This is so that you get the most of those big heavy leg movements. But some people might argue that you might be better off putting some of your tough upper body movements first. And this is because if you're really fatigued after heavy deadlifts, you might not perform well on subsequent back work. I think this is a very reasonable critique. It doesn't apply so much to people who are less advanced, but if you are advanced and you're lifting really heavy weights on your deads and you find yourself really trashed for your upper body work, then you could try swapping things around. Remember, the exercise order I present here is really just a rough guideline. The order of exercises does involve a lot of personal preference, so feel free to swap things around to see what works better for you. Next, we have machine rows for the back, 4 sets of 8 to 12. If you can get something chest supported here, that would be nice. Specifically, I've tried to place back movements here that don't involve your lower back very much, and this is because your lower back is going to be fatigued already after deadlifts. Then we have dumbbell curls for the biceps, 3 sets of 8 to 12. You can do these alternated or with 2 hands, it doesn't really matter. After that, we have rope hammer curls, also for the biceps, 2 sets of 12 to 20. Finally, we have upright rows for the side delts, 4 sets of 8 to 12. And you'll see that I moved around a bit of side delt work onto our pull day. Upright rows are kind of a pull, so I think they fit well here. Next, we have push day number 2, and we start off with hack squats for the quads, 4 sets of 6 to 10. Then we have leg extensions also for the quads, 3 sets of 10 to 15. After that, we have dumbbell overhead presses, 3 sets of 5 to 8. Following those, close grip bench press for the triceps and chest, 5 sets of 6 to 10. Following that, we have cable press downs for the triceps, 2 sets of 10 to 15. You'll notice that I like to mix up the implements I use for each muscle group within a program. For example, for triceps here, we have some cable work, some barbell work, and some dumbbell work. Each of these different implements has some specific advantages and disadvantages, as well as different force tension curves. So as a rule of thumb, it's a good idea to include a mixture. You don't need to include every type of movement in every program, but the idea is that you rotate through as you make modifications to your program over time, and thus have a good variety. Next, we have machine lateral raises for the side delts, 4 sets of 12 to 20. Following that, machine calf raises for the calves, 4 sets of 10 to 15. Next, we have pull day number 2, and we start off with good mornings for the glutes and hamstrings, 3 sets of 6 to 10. Really focus on trying to get a good range of motion with these. You really want to go down until you feel stretch in your hamstrings. Next, we have leg curls for the hamstrings, 3 sets of 10 to 15. Moving on, meadows rows for the back, 4 sets of 8 to 12. These are underrated back movement, which are basically a single arm row using the landmine barbell attachment. Then we have neutral grip lat pull downs also for the back, 4 sets of 10 to 15. Then we have machine preacher curls for the biceps, 3 sets of 8 to 12. Following that, Bayesian curls for the biceps, 2 sets of 10 to 15. And these are a standing single arm cable curl where your upper arm is actually behind your body. This puts a stretch on the long head of your biceps. Finally, we finish up with upright rows for the side delts, 4 sets of 10 to 15. Now notice here that our quads are getting trained on 3 days. Our push day number 1 with our squat and leg press, on pull day number 1 with lunges, and on deadlifts depending on your stance. A sumo deadlift does involve the quads quite a bit. And on push day number 2 with our hack squat and leg extension. This program would be a great option if you wanted to bring up your legs because you're training them more often. We also get a 4 times per week frequency for our side delts, which you know I love. Another thing I wanted to point out is that our push days have slightly more sets than our pull days. And this is because the exercises involved on our pushing days are actually less fatiguing than on pull days. Squats are a little less fatiguing than deadlifts, plus we have things like calf work and lateral raises. So it makes sense that we can put a few more sets on these workouts. Now, if you guys are using these programs to bulk up or lean down, make sure you check out my books. I have one on fat loss and on bulking. They're on my website, askdrswole.com. Nutrition is definitely something you want to get a handle on. Okay, now that you've seen the program, let's talk about my preferred layout. This is my preferred setup. We have push day number 1, then rest. Pull day number 1, rest. Push 2, pull 2, and rest. Here's why I set this up this way. First of all, you typically want to spread out your rest days as much as possible across the week, and this is so that you're really making the most out of them. That is, you can come into each workout as fresh as possible. And this applies especially in programs like this where you're actually training legs every day. You really want to minimize the number of times legs comes back to back. So in this program, I would consider a clear disadvantage if you had placed these 2 days back to back and trained twice in a row, twice in a week. In something like upper lower, at least you don't really have interference between those 2 days. Next, you'll notice that when push and pull days come back to back later in the week, which is inevitable in a 4-day split, I've placed my easier movements here. And this is to account for the fact that these 2 days are back to back. On these 2 days, which are surrounded by rest days, I've placed our biggest squat, deadlift, horizontal press, and pulling movements. This makes sure that you're as rested as possible for these big heavy hitters so that you can be as productive as possible with them. On this side, you'll see that I've placed very quad dominant movements on my push day and very hamstring glute dominant movements on my pull day. And this is to minimize the interference between those 2 days. Hack squats and leg extensions don't use your lower back very much, and good mornings are a very pure hip hinge. That is, you don't have very much knee flexion or quad involvement. So it is very possible to program leg training back to back as long as you're careful about your exercise selection. Now, because I've chosen exercises that really split up the legs, this wouldn't be so much of a problem, but in general, when you have a push and pull day coming back to back, I'd prefer having the push day come before the pull day. And this is because you don't want to go into squat type movements with a tired lower back. Also, if you were using deadlift variations on the pull day, these tend to produce more fatigue than your squat type movements, and you wouldn't want to start your push day really fatigued. Okay, now let's talk about the pros and cons of this modified push-pull split. Starting with the pros, first of all, this program spreads out your leg work across all 4 days, which is something I actually really like. One of the problems with most typical bodybuilding splits, like bro splits and even push-pull legs and the Arnold split, is that you tend to have really tough leg days. This isn't as much of a problem for those latter splits, where at least you're spreading things out over 2 days, but still, proportionally, your leg days are going to be much tougher than other days. The problem is, if you have a really tough leg day, it's more likely that your later work on those leg days is going to be be less productive. By spreading out your leg work, you're able to recover in between sessions and thus produce more productive volume across the week. I also think this style of programming can be easier mentally. You'll see a lot of people getting themselves psyched up for their massive leg day, and while this might be fun sometimes, I do think it's more sustainable in the long run if you're not scared of one or two particular workouts. Next, with this push-pull split, you get a higher frequency for quads and side delts. The quads here get trained 3 times per week, and the side delts get trained 4 times per week, which you know I love doing for you guys. I think the side delts recover quickly so they can handle higher frequencies. The higher frequency also allows you to put in more volume, and most people just have weak side delts. There aren't a lot of splits out there besides modified full body splits that actually give you a higher frequency for quads. Next, this program has great fatigue distribution, and this largely comes secondary to the fact that you've spread out your leg work over all 4 days. But you'll notice that when we look at the breakdown of the days, we have a lower body segment and an upper body segment on each day. I really like having relatively even stresses throughout your training days. I think this just makes better use of your body's recovery resources. Finally, with push-pull, you have no interference between your upper body sessions. This is the nice thing about having that push-pull dynamic, where you train all your upper body pushing muscles like your chest and triceps and shoulders on one day, and then your back and biceps on another day. So you can really train those muscles hard, knowing that you won't train them again for a little while. This, however, does come with a caveat, which we'll talk about in the cons. Speak of the devil, disadvantages. First of all, with this program, biceps and triceps comes after pushing and pulling movements. This is a disadvantage I really don't like about the push-pull type setup, and this applies to push-pull legs as well. Your pushing and pulling movements do involve your biceps and triceps, and by the time you get to your direct bicep and tricep work later in the workout, you're already fatigued. Thus, you won't be able to perform as much productive volume for those. Lastly, as I mentioned earlier in the weekly setup part, your leg work does come back to back later in the week. This would be more of an issue if you play squats and deadlifts back to back, but you saw from my exercise selection that I was careful to put very quad dominant exercises on push day number 2 and very glute and hamstring dominant exercises on pull day number 2. So hence the asterisk, you can really get around this problem with careful programming. A point I want to make here is that you don't have to be so black and white about days coming back to back being an issue. Often through careful selection of your exercises, weights, and reps, you can have back-to-back training days that even train the same muscles. Now, I will be sharing this full program as an Excel file in my Facebook group. So if you haven't checked it already, find my Facebook group link in the description below. Join the group and you can download the program for free. If you want to see a program based on a split that I think is even better than this one, check out this video where I share a full hypertrophy program based on the Dr. Swole split, which is basically a hybrid between push-pull and the Arnold split. This is a split that I came up with personally to get around some of the disadvantages we talked about here. You definitely don't want to miss out on that one. Make sure you subscribe and we'll see you next time.